Hello, friends. I hope you're all well. I know you've all been missing the Chabura tremendously, but don't worry. The good news is we will be restarting the weekly Devar Torah project. So over the course of the summer months, we'll be inviting members and friends to share an insight into the Parasha. And if you're interested in being involved, definitely get in touch and reach out. With your permission, I'll get the ball rolling, and I'd like to share with you a perspective that I hope we find interesting and that I hope will provide some clarity into an episode that many of us struggle with and perhaps find even problematic. And of course, that's the story of Pineḥas, which really took place at the end of last week's Parasha, the assassination of Zimri and Cosbi, the Nasi and this Midianite princess. And it's a serious dilemma because if you think about it, it's clear that the zealotry paid off. It ended the Magefa. HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly vindicates this action and praises Pineḥas. And he's even granted this Brit Shalom and Keter Kehuna. On the other hand, we know that the Torah really frowns upon those who take the law into their own hands. And, obviously the famous case of Shimon and Levi, it's not clear that what they did was right. And it's interesting to know that Zimri is actually a descendant of Shimon, who killed the entire city because of this inappropriate sexual relationship. But anyway, in general, we see about Nadav and Avihu, Moshe hitting the rock, Shaul offering korban. There's all these cases with good intentions, but they weren't commanded to do so. And they went and took the law into their own hand. And we see that, that wasn't what was supposed to be done. The Torah is law. We have judicial process. We have a procedure for everything. There's halakha. And in Pineḥas' time, there was the Zekenim, the Sanhedrin, Moshe Rabbeinu and the Urim Vetumim. There's a whole system of courts and justice in Judaism. So how can someone just go and be a judge and executioner and commit such an extreme violent act without the necessary due process? Now, if you think that's just us as sensitive modern readers who have this problem, well, you're wrong, because it's clear from Chazal already, this whole halachic discussion where if Zimri would have, second later, Pineḥas would have been chayav mitah. The Gemara speaks about how the Malachim even protested weren't happy with something about Pineḥas did. The Gemara speaks about how, which Rashi quotes, how the people of other Shevatim were angry about this vigilante behavior, which I'll come to later. But the point is that Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha ve'en morin ken, right? In other words, yes, he was correct, but we don't teach this. It's clear that Chazal were uncomfortable. They were ambivalent with this extrajudicial killing. And it's also important to remember the context of the Tanaim and the Amoraim, the time of zealotry, and the Kanaim, the destruction they brought at the time of the temple. But if you read Tanakh, this is an exceptional case. At the end of the day, there are a few examples, but it's not supposed to be the norm. We're supposed to be a law-abiding nation, not a nation of zealots. We're not meant to be Pineḥas throwing spears around and Shimon Bar Yochai burning people when we come out of caves. HaKadosh Baruch Hu justifies this act, but the norm is peace. The norm is the rule of law. And perhaps that's what even the Keter Kehuna represents. Kehuna represents service, procedure, order. It represents shalom, right? Not violence and chaos. And it's interesting that the Ralbag, he says that Pineḥas was awarded this Brit Shalom, like Nobel Peace Prize, because he in a way brokered peace between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Israel. The Ibn Ezra, Barbanel and others, they say it was a form of pardon, a protection, so that Zimri's family wouldn't revenge kill, like a Goel Adam. And Rav Hirsch argues that really appeasement isn't always peace. Peace is not about pacifism. Sometimes war and violence is an act of peace. Nevertheless, even if we say this is exceptional, I'd like to focus on why this particular incident, why did it warrant such a zealous response? Why was this et la'asot ba'Hashem? And to answer this, I think you need to analyze the sin. What does it constitute, this brazen action of Zimri? There's three components. Firstly, avodah zarah, the theological infidelity towards God. It was gilui arayot, the sexual infidelity. And then there was the political infidelity, which is sleeping with the Midianites, literally and figuratively. We were supposed to be a Yoshev Badad. We were supposed to be a nation, Bilam and Balak, the Midian. They saw us as Matov Alecha Yaakov Mishkelatech Israel just in the last couple of weeks. But nevertheless, what did people say about Pineḥas? She says, "Lefi shehayu hashevatim mevazin oto." They would this haritem ben puti ze shepitem avi imo agalim leavodat kochavim veharag nasi shevet miYisrael. They saw this son of a puti who fattened his grandfather fattened the calves for avodah zarah, and this man, this grandson of Midianites, basically came and killed a prince of Israel. Right? We see clearly they were making fun of him. They were upset and protesting. They were questioning really his integrity, you could see, and his authenticity. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu respond? The clue is in the second pasuk. Pineḥas ben Elazar ben Aharon HaKohen. Right? He might have been a grandson of a former Midianite priest, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I can guarantee you, he knew who he was. He was the son of Elazar, son of Aharon HaKohen. And it also says, Bekanot Kinati, Betocham. It was still within, among the people. He knew who he was part of. He knew very well who he was. He knew his lineage, who he came from. He knew who he represented and where his loyalties lay. So even though Pineḥas was zealous in the cause of Hashem, he remained in the midst of the Jews, and he did not set himself apart from them. And no, we're not supposed to be a nation of zealots, but this act of rebellion, the ultimate rebellion and public nature of this Chilul Hashem, this disloyalty and public promiscuity, was a rare moment, necessitated a rare moment of heroism and zealousness. And I don't think the takeaway from this is to take matters into your own hands and start meting out justice. But the lesson we have to learn from Pineḥas is to know yourself, know who we are, know who we come from, who do we represent, where do our loyalties rest. And it's sometimes, I think to reinforce this idea of knowing oneself and knowing who you are, we have the clear story of Selofchad's daughters as well, which is part of this week's Parasha. They had this sense of self-worth, self-esteem. They valued their father's identity and Eretz Israel, so much so that they had the courage and the confidence to protest and make their case in front of Moshe Rabbeinu and the whole Edah. And they too were right, even though they were going against the norm and the orthodoxy of the day and going against the flow and against the crowds. It's clear that this idea of identity is a key theme, and about knowing who we are, where we come from. And the Pesukim, has a detailed report of the census, talks about the laws of Yerusha, about Moshe's successor. All of this point to this idea of the preservation of identity. And I think this is the legacy and the takeaway we can take away from this parasha of Pineḥas. So I hope you enjoyed that, and Shabbat Shalom Umevarach.